Sleeping Beauty. A long time ago, in a kingdom far away, a baby princess was born. The king and queen were so happy and proud of their little daughter, they invited the most important fairies in the land to come to her christening. The invitations were sent out, and the fairies set off for the palace. When the christening was over, all the fairies crowded round the baby's cradle. The time had come for them to give the princess her gifts. The first fairy gave her beauty. The second gave her goodness. The third fairy said she would be charming. The fourth promised she would be clever. The fifth fairy gave her grace. And the sixth fairy said she would always be happy. All of a sudden, the door to the banqueting hall burst open. Standing there was the ugliest, most evil-looking fairy you can imagine. "Why was I not invited?" she screamed. The evil fairy shook with anger as she went up to the cradle. The king and queen trembled as she pointed out at the baby princess. "Before she is 16, the princess will prick her finger on the spindle and die." And with a terrible cackle of laughter, she vanished. Everyone was shocked by the wicked fairy's spell, and the poor queen began to cry. Just at that moment, the smallest fairy stepped from behind a pillar where she had been hiding. "I have not yet given the princess my gift," she said in a kind voice. "The princess will not die, but fall asleep for 100 years. Then a young prince will come and wake her with a kiss, and the evil spell will be broken." That very day, the king sent out messengers all over the land. All the spindles and the spinning wheels were smashed or burned. He made a very strict law that no one should ever use a spindle again. This way, the king hoped to save his daughter princess from the fairy's evil spell. 16 years passed. The princess grew up beautiful, good, charming, and happy. In fact, she grew up with all the gifts the fairies had promised. One day, she was gazing up at the palace when she noticed an open window at the very top of the highest tower. "I wonder if anyone lives up there," said the princess. "I think I'll climb right up to the top and see." Now the palace was a wonderful place to explore because it was so big and rambling. So the princess climbed up the winding staircase until she found herself in front of a small door. Gently she pushed it open. There, in a tiny attic room, sat a little old lady spinning. She had never heard the king's very strict law about spindles, as she never left her attic room. "What are you doing?" asked the princess, very interested. "Just spinning wool, my dear," smiled the old lady. "May I try?" asked the princess, and she reached out for the spindle. As she touched the sharp point, it pricked her finger. The evil fairy's spell had worked. At once the princess fell to the floor in a deep sleep. When the king and queen were told what had happened, and when they saw the princess asleep, they knew the evil spell had come true. Their beloved daughter would sleep for 100 years. The servants carried the princess from the attic room and laid her on a beautiful velvet-covered bed. Now the good fairy, who promised the princess would not die, came at once to the palace. Without a word, she touched everybody with her wand. She touched the cooks in the kitchen and the servants who waited at the palace banqueting table. She touched the guards and the footmen, the pages and the maids. Her magic wand even sent the princess's little dog to sleep. A strange silence fell over everything. Gently, her wand touched the king and queen before she flew away from the palace. The good fairy waved her wand for the last time, and a thick forest sprang up around the palace. Tangled briar and thorns crept over the paths and up the walls. This way, no one could cut through the undergrowth or visit the sleeping palace until 100 years had gone by. As time passed, people forgot all about the palace and the sleeping princess. One day, a handsome prince was out hunting nearby. He happened to look up and saw the very tops of the palace towers peeping above the trees. From out of nowhere, the good fairy appeared. She told him of the princess and the evil spell that only a handsome prince like him could break. At once the prince drew his sword and began to cut a path through the thick brambles. Very soon he reached the palace. He passed snoring guards and sleeping ladies and gentlemen. The palace cat was snoozing peacefully on a cushion. There were even a couple of mice fast asleep under the table in the banqueting hall. They had all been asleep for 100 years. Suddenly, the prince looked up and saw the beautiful princess asleep in a velvet-covered bed. He knelt beside her and kissed her hand. At last, the evil spell was broken, and everyone woke up just as the good fairy had planned. The prince and princess fell in love, and after a while they were married, and of course lived happily ever after. Bye bye.